We can be seated. I want to call forward Noah Pickus, who is the president of the synagogue, who's going to share some words with us tonight. And I will just say that Noah is a wonderful partner, and that our community is blessed to have him giving this time in this service for this many years.
Thank you, Rabbi Graber. Can you all hear me? So Shabbat Shalom and Good Yom Tov to Rabbi Graber and Rabbi Sager and Cantor Myers, to my fellow board members, to congregants, and especially to any visitors, to any newcomers in our community. I want to begin, if you'll allow me, on a personal note. I want to look up at the eye in the sky and say to my mother that we're delighted that you're here in North Carolina with us in Durham, and we love you. I also want to mark something that really should be unremarkable, but because it's not yet that, it is worth noting. Those of you who have been here longer can afterwards correct me if I get this wrong, but I believe I am the first president in the history of Bethel to take the baton from one female president, Rachel Galanter, and to hand the baton to another female president, Debbie Goldstein, who will then hand the baton to Leslie Winter. And to Gladys and Shula and Abby and Rachel, I salute you. And to Debbie and to Leslie, I thank you. Everything that we've been able to do is because of this incredible team that we have working with the rabbi and others, and I'm just incredibly grateful for it. I do want to invite all of you for a moment to think about what if you were president of a conservative synagogue in Durham, North Carolina, and you were in the closing phase of a capital campaign, and you were deep into plans for renovation, and you were thinking about our own little diaspora in the making that we're going to go into next year. And at the same time you were living in this world, and your head was spinning, and you wondered every day if the center was going to hold. What would you do? What would you say on Kol Nidre? Where would you start? I know, I was thinking exactly the same thing. It's obvious where you'd start, right? You'd start in China. So some of you may remember about 6 weeks ago getting a message from me during the uproar over Charlottesville. And I'm there in China now often because I'm helping to set up a new university. And as you might imagine, there are a lot of challenges in trying to find common ground, in trying, when you don't share a language, when you don't share a history, in trying to forge some kind of shared experience and understanding. And some of the challenges are small. So I would often, when I'm in a cafeteria or a restaurant and I would want to tell people that I didn't eat pork, it turns out, you may already know this, I didn't, that the word for pork or pig in Chinese is Jew. And the word for no in Chinese is bu. So I would go around in cafeterias saying, buju, buju, buju. Only later was I told that that was not exactly the right translation, that was a little bit like saying, no pig, I'm not a pig, I'm not a pig. So luckily I came back, and if any of you know Karen Rossi in our congregation, she's a remarkable Chinese teacher, and she has been helping me to learn Chinese, and if I don't embarrass myself, Karen, I can now say, Wu bu yao chi juro. which means I don't want any pig meat. Some of the challenges are a little bigger. Imagine that you're trying to explain to Chinese parents why their children should come to a liberal arts university when there is no translation for the words liberal arts. You know, it's like if you went and you said, I have this drink, and it's got water, and it's got sugar, and it's got a special ingredient we can't tell you about, but it's really fantastic. Send your only child to us for 4 years and pay for it. You can see the dilemma that is quite serious. How do you explain something when you don't even have the same terms for it? But if there are challenges that are small and large, there are also some remarkable and unexpected opportunities. Places where you find common ground that you didn't expect it. I was teaching a class, and I had mostly Chinese students in it, and we went into Shanghai. We went into the restricted sector for stateless refugees in Shanghai. Now, some of you may know what I'm referring to. It otherwise was known as the Shanghai Ghetto. And this was the part of Shanghai where, during Hitler's Germany, 20,000 Jews managed to get out at the very last moment when they were turned away everywhere else because they could get into China at that point through a strange quirk that there were no visas required. And standing there in the old synagogue, you can feel the power and the pain and the weight and the human cost of being stateless. And it's a unique moment because for my Chinese students who don't know anything about this history, it's a real moment of pride for them. And it's one that helps forge a very unexpected sense of common ground and common experience between us. And so I've been thinking a lot about how we forge common ground at this time. And I want tonight to reflect on three things. I want to reflect on how that relates to us here at Bethel and what it might mean for us. First, I want to think about how we might forge common ground and common experiences when we're not in this building next year. And second, I want to think about how we might forge it when we engage with communities outside of our own. And finally, how the building itself, the renovated space, can help us re-knit our own community when we return. So about a month ago, I started to think about what it was really going to be like when we are out of this building for a year. And what we would do. What would that experience be like? And Trudy and Mira and I went a little while ago to what is called First Fridays here at Bethel. This is billed as open to anybody, but especially designated or oriented toward, as they put it, the youngish and the Jewish. And it's a wonderful, wonderful event. It's got families, it's got singles, it's got couples, it's got people who are youngish and Jewish and sometimes not as youngish, but they're there in a variety of ways. And there's this incredible sense of ruach, of energy, of experience, of just finding that this is the right place for this group to connect. It's where they can enter into Bethel. And from the president's perspective, it's even better, because they thought up the idea, they conceived it, they put it on, didn't check with me, it just happened. It's just there. Self-conceived, self-organized, self-actualized. And it occurred to me when we were there that evening, what a great opportunity we all have in this next year to do just that, to find new ways that we might relate to each other. We need, of course, to start with our own regular Shabbat services and the incredible generosity of Trinity Presbyterian to host us, and the normal, robust range of educational and social programming that we'll do. But why not treat this time as a little different? It's like when you go on a retreat, right? Or you go on a trip, or you're working abroad. What would you do in those circumstances? Well, you might invite people into your homes in a way you didn't under normal circumstances, right? You might start a walking hevra, or a bicycling minion, or a study group at the coffee shop. Mira and I go to every Joe Van Gogh in the city. You might do something different. And mostly what I want to say is we should think about the fact of our dislocation as an invitation, as an opening to be innovative, to try things that sometimes when you're in an institutional building, it can become institutional strictures. We do things the way we do things because that's just the way we do things. But when you're out in this new way, you've all done this, you've all gone on a trip, you've all been in new circumstances, and all of a sudden you're having a meal with someone you wouldn't normally have a meal, or you're doing, so I don't know what we could create. I really don't. I didn't know, I couldn't think of First Fridays if you'd given me a week. But I think you do. I think you all might have ideas like that. And I really just want to personally invite you to think about what is one new way that you'd like to connect in this new year. And then, like the youngish and the Jewish, just do it. Don't ask me. Don't even tell me. Just do it. I'll show up. I've also been thinking a lot this year, as I know many of you have, about how we might find common ground with communities that are outside of our synagogue and outside of our own Jewish life. On Rosh Hashanah and Yom Kippur, we say the Unatana Tokef prayer, the key line of which I know none of you forget, that Teshuvah, Tefillah, and Tzedakah shall avert the severity of the decree. That repentance and prayer, and as I've learned in conversation with Rabbi Graber, righteousness. The tzedakah comes from the same root as tzedek. It's about justice. That repentance and prayer and righteousness are what we are called upon to avert the severity of the decree upon us. As Jews, this underscores the simple point that we all know. We have obligations outside of ourselves. And more than that, we have things to say to the world. We have things to give to the world. Now, this raises a hard question. How should we as Jews respond to the moral issues of our time? Or to be more specific, how should Beth El as an institution respond? And as you know, over the last year, we have had to confront this question. And for some in our congregation, the answer was, as an institution, never. It's not Beth El's job to respond for its congregants to the moral issues of our time. Let individuals do that. For others, it was the opposite. It was we should respond as often as we are needed. And for many of you, it was mostly never, but sometimes, though unsure of when or about what. Now, I have a confession to make here. I grew up in Berkeley, California in the 1960s and 70s. I had these lovely blonde ringlets, believe it or not. But what I saw there was congregations that were driven primarily by their politics. I couldn't ever tell, was there anything at any time in the Jewish tradition that might differ from where a person or a congregation drew their politics from, where they would diverge? How did they always magically go together? Jews don't agree on anything. How could it always be this? So I confess, I was scarred by that. I do not rush to make statements. And yet, being president of Beth El made me very aware of the real need to find ways to speak to issues that so many congregants feel in their bones. Charlottesville was one of those times. We needed to speak. In Charlottesville, we were confronted with both an anti-Semitic affront to Judaism and a white nationalist affront to other minorities and immigrants. So statements have value. But I don't need to tell you that they are also very difficult to craft in a thoughtful way, under time pressure, while you're in China, for a pluralistic community that believes different things. And so we've built a process here at Bethel that makes speaking possible, but not easy. And let's admit it, we're learning how to do it. We're learning how to make what we hope are good statements, and equally important, we're learning when not to make them at all. And whether you agree with that approach or not, what I hope you can all agree with is that issuing statements isn't the only way that Bethel should engage in the world. Here are two other ways. One is we could study together about what Jewish values actually tell us about the issues and events in the world, the traditions, the experiences, the texts. It won't come as any surprise to you that there will be complexity, there will be multiplicity, there will be different things that come out of that. And I mean really study. I mean getting underneath the surface of what we all think the Jewish tradition or traditions might teach us. The Torah teaches us, right, to take care of the stranger. And the Torah teaches us to uphold the rule of law. That's the beginning of a conversation. How do you square those two in this circumstance, on that issue? It's not the end of a conversation. And the goal here is not to figure out Bethel's position. The goal here is to actually see if our tradition and our texts have anything to offer us today. What can they say to us today? And it is to model, at least in our own community, how we can seek common ground, even if actually achieving that so often will elude us. A second way we can live out our commitment to justice and to righteousness is by taking action. I would suggest that we might think about in particular that in our own local community. For those so inclined, this might include our traditional and very important food drives. It might be part of our newly launched interfaith activities with an African American mosque here in Durham. Or maybe it would mean new efforts and outreach to a conservative church. Or it might mean protesting in Raleigh, or to go further afield, supporting organizations in Israel. I'm not going to tell you what it is or how it ought to be done, just like I don't know how we can innovate in the year we're out of the building. I don't know what we should do in every instance, and I won't tell you. But I will say that across all of these activities, we should have a goal. That goal is to live out Judaism's commitment to the public square, to be a voice or to be voices in the public square. And that for Bethel, here's what I want Bethel to be known for, that Bethel is a place that encourages Jews to engage as Jews in the world, whatever side they're on. Then I think we would spend less time about a particular statement because it wouldn't be the only thing. We'd all be doing all these kinds of things in ways that made sense to us, even if they were not necessarily with an official Bethel stamp. And taken together, these two activities, studying together and building community outside our synagogue, could do really two very important things. They could actually make an impact somewhere outside our synagogue, and they could do so without marginalizing any group inside the synagogue. That is a goal worthy of our aspirations. That's what we should try to do. Last comments I want to make are about thinking about what happens after we're out in the diaspora, while we're engaging in the world, and what happens when we move back into our building, into the renovated synagogue. What role does this space play in enabling us to continue to engage in the world and to engage with each other? Now, there's a second meaning to the Unatana Tokath prayer, right? That teshuvah, tefillah, and tzedakah avert the severe decree. Here, tzedakah does also mean charity. It is about taking care of each other now and in the future. Tzedakah is not separate from the Jewish experience and expression of holiness. It is crucial to that experience and expression. As fragile as it is for us to forge bonds outside our religious community, we cannot take for granted the bonds that we need to continually refresh inside our community. Jewish history does not mean a Jewish future. It means that we have to forge that. And right now, a big part of that for Bethel is renovating our home to make it more accessible, more sustainable, and more conducive to everything we do together. Now, I know, right about now, your back is starting to hurt. You're wondering which of the 3 temperature zones are you actually in, and did you dress appropriately? Right? And if you're in the back, you're wondering if you can hear me, and all of you have started to contemplate that eternal question. Tell me again why we face south. So if so, then I've spoken long enough to accomplish my task, which is to remind you that we are close to fixing all those problems. And the good news, the great news, is if the gates are closing here on Neila, when they come to that, they are open just a little bit longer for the Our Story, Our Time campaign. We're at a crucial moment. So many of you have been so generous that we can see our goal within our grasp. And in October and November of this year, the board is going to need to make some key decisions on what we can actually afford to build. We're going to be setting in place what our communal home will look like for our children and our children's children. And so I have a question. How often do you get to join together with 400 other families to see the future and to help meet it? What a rare opportunity that is in an individual's life, in a family's life, and in a community's life, to see that future and know that we can meet it. That's a singular moment. We want to build all that we need for our future. But that decision depends on how close we are to our goal. And if we can raise $500,000 more, we can be confident that the building will be great and it will be fully paid for. So it is of the utmost importance that everyone has a chance to participate in this act of tzedakah, this mitzvah. And so in the next few weeks, I hope you'll consider what you could make, what impact you could make on Bethel's future with a pledge that can be spread over 5 years. If we haven't been able to reach out to you yet, please don't wait. Reach out to us. And if you've already been contacted but haven't given, maybe you were wondering if we'd really pull this off. The answer is yes, we will. But if you were waiting to see if we could do it without you, the answer is no. So let me close by urging you to think about this year to come, to take this opportunity to do three things. First, to take the opportunity to create something new in your Bethel life. Second, take this year as an opportunity to engage more fully as a Jew in the world. And last, help us complete the capital campaign and build our new home. Lashana Tova.
Say Yasher Koach to Noah for his words and his leadership. We're going to turn in our